Yeah, so what are the issues? Basically, pension funds, right? Typically, pension funds have growing liabilities, especially in developed markets, US and Eurozone, even places like Australia, I think. Growing liabilities, and the funding requirements are definitely they can't sustain at such low yields, and pension funds largely buy government bonds. Okay, so if there is increase in liabilities in pension funds, okay, what is increase in liabilities? That means as the liability goes up, they're not earning enough, right? Then what happened is who has to fund them? The government. And when there's a hole in government finances, then there is a reduced ability of governments to spend further. So they can't do a fiscal stimulus. So which is the biggest problem with the Eurozone at this point of time. Because the Eurozone requires, actually the ECB is telling them to spend, but they don't have the money to spend. One is they're under austerity, and second is their pension liabilities are only growing higher. Okay, so where do these pension funds go finally? So they'll have to search for yields. Yeah, so deflation and recession. So people put off buying for further fall in expectation of further fall in prices. So that means if people put off consuming, then there is no credit growth, there is no investment growth, there are no jobs being created. So you have a self-fulfilling cycle of further deflation, depression, recession, etc. And indebted governments, when there is deflation, governments cannot service debt. So you'll have sovereign debt crisis coming up all over again, especially for countries that are running debt at over 100% of GDP, right? And obviously lack of incentive for private sector to spend or invest. Then, like we said, asset price bubbles, and it can continue to get created because of asset price bubbles. We have already seen money flowing into equities, junk bonds. It's a matter of time before they flow into high interest rate currencies. You can have potentially a real estate bubble. I think there is already real estate bubbles happening in parts of the world. For example, UK had one. You are finding some Eurozone nations seeing housing prices rise sharply. And what about central bank reversal? So what will be the cost of reversal? It can be potentially huge. So that's why if suddenly the Fed starts hiking rates or the ECB stops asset purchases, then what happens to the markets? How will they react? How will they take it? Because the markets have got used to steroids, right? And suddenly you get out of steroids, then you have withdrawal symptoms, and nobody wants to see that withdrawal symptoms. So that's why you have the Fed struggling to hike rates, and you have the worry about. So if central banks can, if they do stop QE or they do stop rate hikes or even start cutting rates, because if they start hiking rates, they would be worried about going back into deflation and recession that nobody wants. So the question is, when can this happen at all, if it ever happens, at least in this next few years? Okay, so potentially you still have a case where central banks may not at all tighten for a longer period of time.